Jesus said to the Pharisees, there was a rich man who dressed in purple garments and fine linen, and dined sumptuously each day. And lying at his door was a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who would gladly have eaten his fill at the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. Dogs even used to come and lick his sores. When the poor man died, he was carried away by angels to the bosom of Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. And from the netherworld, where he was in torment, he raised his eyes and saw Abraham far off, and Lazarus at his side. And he cried out, Father Abraham, have pity on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I'm suffering torment in these flames. Abraham replied, My child, remember that you received what was good during your lifetime, while Lazarus likewise received what was bad. But now he's comforted here, while you are tormented. Moreover, between us and the great chasm is established to prevent anyone from crossing who might not wish to go from our side to yours, or from your side to ours. He said, Then I beg you, Father, send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they too come to his place of torment. But Abraham replied, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. He said, Oh no, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead comes to them, they will repent. But Abraham said, If they will not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded if someone like the Lord should rise from the dead. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Does anybody remember the TV show Chico and the Man?
Yes.
Raise your hands. Oh, you're older than I thought you were. Well, Chico was Freddie Prinze, and by the way, committed suicide after a while. Well, whenever Freddie came into the auto body shop, and the man would say, sweep the floor, he says, That's not my job. That's not my job. Or a customer came to have his brakes redone, and he'd say, That's not my job. That attitude is exactly what the rich man replied when Lazarus was lying at the door of the rich man, and he was covered with sores and starving, and gladly would have had eaten the fill from the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. To eat your fill really means constant and unfulfilled longing. Constant and unfulfilled longing. He was always hungry. As the prodigal son was starving because of his unfulfilled, promiscuous lifestyle that left him very empty and hungry. Someone said, when the body is swallowed up with delight in refreshing itself, the heart relaxes to empty joy. So when the body is swallowed up with delight in refreshing itself, me, myself, and I, the heart relaxes to empty joy. The rich man's table of self-gratification is a stark contrast to the prodigal father last week of the table of gratitude. The gratitude when he saw Lazarus, the words of Chico came into his mind. It's not my job to feed Lazarus. Remember the story of Cain and Abel in the Genesis? Well, the father asked for the best fruits of their labor. And because of jealousy, Cain killed Abel, who had a better offering. Then his father came up to Cain and says, "Oh, where's your brother?" And he said, "I don't know. I'm not my brother's keeper." What he was saying, the same thing as the rich man. It's not my job to take care of my brother. Yeah, both are saying the same thing. It's not my job. A few days ago, I was going up to West Farm Mall, and I stopped off at a gas station. And I looked over, and there was that aisle, the aisle where people stand, like veterans looking for food or money or whatever. And their cars were going south towards Route 9, and others were going north towards the West Farms. It was right near the Barnes & Noble. And I was sitting at the gas station and looking out, and there's a car was going south, and the fellow saw the lady standing there. So he made a U-turn and came around and went to the young lady and gave her some offering, gave her some money. And he asked her his name. Now, all of you know who Bill Gates is, the Microsoft millionaire. Everybody knows his name. But I didn't know the lady standing on a corner, hoping to get some money. Yes, it's funny, in this story, however, it's just the opposite. We don't know the rich man. We don't know it's with Bill Gates. But we do know the name of Lazarus. And when you don't get to know a person's name, and you give that person, then there's an intimate relationship with that person. Last night, someone took me out to dinner. And the first thing, when the waiter came home, I said, "What's your name?" And the second waiter came home, "What's your name?" And once they gave the name, and they said, "Who are you?" "I'm Father Ed." Our relationship changed. It became more close, more intimate, more accountable to each other. I needed to respect not the waiter, but John. And he needed to respect not a customer, but Father Ed. And it's interesting that in the story we don't know anything about the rich man, but we do know the name of Lazarus. That means the rich man knew Lazarus, because Lazarus must have been knocking on his door many times. So the rich man got to know Lazarus, but he never developed an intimate relationship with Lazarus. Yes, when we look at today's gospel, tells us the rich man was punished not because he was rich, but because he had shown no mercy. He showed no mercy. That's why he ended up going into a tormenting situation. There's nothing wrong with being rich. It's just, what do you do with your money when you're rich? I had a cousin. I used to feel sorry for her. I used to bring food over to her house, and I went to visit her, and she died, and she left $300,000. She would not admit to anyone that she had money. And oftentimes in a marriage relationship, the wife has no idea how much her husband makes, because it's all about money. It's not about people. So Jesus isn't condemning a rich man, but he's just telling him that he was blinded. The prime danger of wealth, it causes us a blindness to the needs of others. To know a person by name and disregards his name and his needs is tremendously greedy. Yes, is it a quid pro quo today? The rich man had everything, he ended up with nothing. The poor man had nothing and ended up with everything. No, it's a lot more than that. When we look at the end of Lazarus' life, we see that he's on the other side of the fence, away from being tormented. And we're asked to be on the same side as Lazarus. But to the degree that we recognize Lazarus in our life, to that degree we are on his side of the fence. And where are the Lazarus in your life? Well, thinking of Bill Warren, who was the Lazarus in his wife's life. They were married for 68 years. 68 years. And he was in the convalescent home for 5.5 years. And there wasn't a day at all where Dorothy, or his wife, went to the convalescent home. Anytime I went to see him or gave him Holy Communion, she was always there. Yes, her husband became a Lazarus. A couple of days ago, yesterday was, a little boy came in to see me and wanted to go to confession. Because he had heard that it's a serious matter when you miss Mass deliberately. So he realized that, and then his parents became his Lazarus. Because they had been away from church for a long time. And he got the mother and father and the sister all to go to confession. Because he saw a Lazarus in his own family. Yes, each one of us has that experience of meeting someone. It's not about wealth. Like this morning on radio I heard the primary purpose of educating your kids and not to learn, but to pass tests so they can go to college and go to get a good job and make a lot of money. Yes, that whole mentality of the rich man is so prevalent even in education. But the important thing is not that the educated, what matters most is what will matter for all eternity. Your marks in school won't matter for all eternity. What matters most is how we respond to the Lazarus in our lives. Yes, your relationship with Christ now will last for all eternity. Because the Lazarus in your life is Christ. What you do to the least of my brethren, you do to Christ. So each one of us has a Lazarus, or many Lazaruses in our life. Yes, to be near Jesus is to live in love. No words need to be spoken in his presence. Your soul is at peace and completely joyous. To live in love, to be near Jesus is to live in love. No words need to be spoken in his presence. Your soul is at peace and completely joyous. Yes, when you look at what matters now is what matters for all eternity. And what matters now to you may not matter for all eternity. So when we read this simple phrase, to be near Jesus is to live in love. No words need to be spoken in his presence. Your soul is at peace and completely joyous. That's living on the other side of the river with Lazarus. A couple of days ago, I had a call in the hospital. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was on duty. And so every priest in these areas is on duty for 2 days or less or more, usually 2 days or more. So I went to the hospital, the ICU, intensive care unit, and the man was there, and he wanted to be anointed before he had an operation. Why did he call me at 10 o'clock? I don't know. Why couldn't it be 4 o'clock? But so I went and I gave him the sacrament of sick. The person said, "Father, is that the last sacrament?" "No, I gave the sacrament of sick last week to you. That was sacrament of sick. But if you went outside and got hit by a car, that was your last sacrament. The last time you received the sacrament of sick." Bill Warren received the sacrament of sick about at least 40 times from me while he was here. And his daughter called me and said, "Father, could you come and give him the last sacrament?" I said, "Well, I gave it to him 40 times. But I went over to the house to him and anointed him, not for his sake, because he already received the sacrament of sick, but for the family's sake, so they'd feel better." Yes, when we look at, I went to the hospital, and I said, "Well, the fellow will feel better." And I walked out, and I saw all these nurses standing around, and they were just chatting. And I looked at their label, and hey, hi Mary, hi Jane, so I got to know their names. They had never seen me before, because I'm usually not there at 10 o'clock at night. Not in that section anyways. So I looked at them, and I said, "Could I ask you a question?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "If you knew then, on the day of your marriage, if you know not what you know now about your spouse, would you have married him? If you knew on the day of your wedding what you know now about your spouse, would you have married him?" There was complete silence from those 6 women. And they dropped their eyes, and they gave me their answer through their silence. And on the way out, I was going to the other section of ICU, and the nurse was worried, "Is there anybody else sick here while I'm at the hospital?" So they just said, "Father, come with me." So we start walking, and she stopped me. I looked at me and started crying. And she said, Father, I just found out last week that my husband was unfaithful. She became the Lazarus. She was the one who was hungry for love. She was the one starving for attention. Yes, sometimes, like my cousin who doesn't admit how much money she had, and she ended up leaving $300,000. Sometimes we lose our roles. Our role is to be rich so that we will reach out and touch others. And our role is to reach out to be a Lazarus. But oftentimes, I am the Lazarus. I'm the one that needs God's love. I'm the one that needs God to be fed by God in the Eucharist. I'm the one that needs to be fed with His good word. Yes, sometimes we don't realize that when we look in the mirror, we find Lazarus. But each one of you today are going to meet somebody. It may be your husband, it may be your wife, it may be your children, it may be your classmate, it may be a co-worker. Every one of us come in contact with a Lazarus. And when we come in contact with a Lazarus, we come to contact with Christ. Because whatever you do for the least of my brethren, you do to me. So are you like Chico? It's not my job. Or are you like Dorothy, who stayed with her husband every day for 5.5 years? And she said, Father, it's just my job. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.